Good evening, everyone. My name is Bill Herbert, and I'm very glad to welcome you to the NCLA's event series. And tonight we have the great pleasure of welcoming John Challis and Sean O'Brien. Incidentally, it is also Intergalactic Poetry Day. That's just in my head. I mean, obviously, it's National Poetry Day, but you're very welcome all the same. And I'm just going to run through a quick introduction and then pass over to both readers. There's a few events coming up. There's a few things that we need to tell you about, and then I'll give you very brief introductions and get going. So the first thing I should say that for folk who are wanting to get writing again, Creative Saturdays is back, which is a kind of all-day course at the weekend, 10 till 3, and it's beginning on the 6th of November and then running weekly. We've got Andrew Hankinson taking the first one, Margaret Wilkinson following up, Joe Clement following up. So look on the NCLA website under courses and you will see those. Now, the next couple of readings are just going to run from this point onwards. So we have an event coming up on the 21st of October, and that's C.J. Hauser, who kind of collection of essays of creative nonfiction, the Crane Wife and other essays is just coming out. It will be out in spring 22, and it's a kind of astonishing account of self-rediscovery. And the quote that we want is here is calling off the wedding and studying whooping cranes. That's what we want. We all want to call off our wedding and to move on to the cranes as quickly as possible. She's going to be interviewed by Charlie Gilmer, who obviously is a prominent journalist working in the same field, and his memoir Fatherhood is also highly recommended. So that's part of the Pass the Baton series, where NCLA invites a speaker to pass the baton on to invite another speaker. So C.J. Hauser will be inviting someone else to read in the spring, so do look out for that. The other event I should draw your attention to is the inaugural James Berry Poetry Prize, which we're going to be announcing on the 28th of October. The judges for that were Neil Astley, Sinead Morrissey, Teresa Munoz, and Jacob Sam-LaRose. And then Natalie Teitler was also involved, bringing that big shortlist down to the 3 people who we're going to be announcing and showcasing on the 28th of October. And they get, obviously, they get the hard cash, but they also get a book publication as well, the debut collection with Bloodaxe books. Now, back to tonight's event. First of all, I should just say, if you have any questions for the poets, what we're going to do is, once I exit stage left, and they will both read for about 20 minutes each, and then there will be a period in which we can ask questions and talk to them. So if you want to ask either Sean or John a question, pop it in the chat and we will collate the chat and put your questions to them. Okay, so I'm delighted with this to be introducing this event tonight. These are both 2 of my favorite poets and oldest friends. I've known John Challis ever since he was just a little beard, no head, no body, just a little beard, and it's been wonderful to watch his work evolve into this extraordinarily strong first collection, the Resurrectionists, through the pamphlet he had, Black Cap with Poetry Salzburg, which won a New Writing North regional title. He's picked up a Pushcart Prize, Northern Writers Award. His poems appeared in lots of different places, but he is now from here and teaching here and living here. His work, however, is very particularly born in the South, born in London, and focuses in on that strange vanishing history of London's working class and the kind of the mythogeography of the city. So hugely looking forward to John's reading tonight. Sean O'Brien, I've known Sean for a very long time, since he used to be standing outside, offering to fight the entire Tory cabinet in the nearest available car park. This is in the old days, but well, actually, he probably thinks the same now, and I think he probably could still take this bunch, you know. So he's won everything. He is a very distinguished writer whose 10th collection has just appeared. He's also a translator, a novelist, a playwright. The 10th collection is It Says Here. And I've just been catching up with this. Sean has entered in what I would call a kind of a late middle phase of extraordinary heightened productivity, where the kind of the mastery of the work has achieved a new level. So, you know, you've got to read fast to keep up with Sean these days. And crucially, in It Says Here, we've got this long poem Hammersmith, which is a kind of Dante-esque, Heaney-esque. There's a few more esques I can mention. Dream quest through London as remembered by previous generations. So the two have this common element in flowing through their work. Okay, that's certainly enough for me. And can I pass on to our first reader tonight, who I've just realized as I'm saying these words, I haven't a clue which one it is. Did we sort out who was reading first, gentlemen? Could you? Oh yeah, okay, sorry, we did, yeah. So in fact, could you welcome John Challis?
No, I was about to say it's John's launch, so I'll go first.
Wait a minute, I'm going to come back in on that one, and we're going to take this again, because this isn't live or anything, so we can just do this at our leisure. Could you welcome Sean O'Brien?
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, Bill. It's great to be reading with John, whose work I've been reading for over 10 years now, and I'm delighted that he's delivered this storming first collection and to be reading with him this evening. Bill is right to say I had a book out this time last year, which is about the worst time you could have a book out in terms of making it known that you had a book out. But, so I'm just going to read a couple of poems from that and then some new work. This one's called I Found My Way, and is a sort of a kind of garden poem, a political kind of garden poem. I found my way. I found my way, the worse for drink, through petal storms, the white, the pink. The place was all significance, the goddess in the jasmine shade, sequestered in her green romance, arch on arch in deep recession. Inaudibly the fountains played. The seasons fled as England slept, and I could not, a trespasser on ground I'd owned. What business underwrote my being there? Yet an appointment must be kept. The roses, hooded for the frost like hangmen, saw that I was lost. And yet this place was all I knew, while how I came there and for what had never troubled me till now. But now I walked that blessed plot, green avenue by avenue, past Royal Rose and Bergamot, in residence, yet passing through. So what conclusion should I draw from this arboreal baroque, when every way led only here, whose silence waited like a clock? And how should I inquire within to learn the nature of the sin for which I was arraigned? And then I saw, this is the center of the rose, an empty sepulchre designed to quench the tongue and close the mind, the perfect, heartless, silent O. She never cares to speak in prose, where there is neither stay nor go, nor any means of saying so. This little poem, An Assignation, is about a love affair so intense and pure that the people involved in it never actually meet. And I think there are lots of advantages to this approach. It's called An Assignation. I will see you in the white square once again beneath the plane trees by the church of St. Eulalie. It will be the middle of the afternoon when everyone has disappeared. but you and I approaching secretly by different streets. My life is nothing but this rendezvous, my love. No past, no afterwards, only the breeze that fidgets like a horse kept waiting in that distant corner of the square, where I can see you now, already seated and expecting no one. Your dress is blue, your book lies open by the empty glass you'll raise, as if in toast to no one, while I pass and raise in turn my non-existent hat in token of this infinite commitment. Farewell then, farewell, à demain. The third poem is called Furniture, and it concerns a friend of mine from my early life who was a victim of the generation to which we belonged, and her life was blighted, as I think the poem makes clear. She became obsessed with going to auction houses and buying wardrobes and suites of furniture, far more of them than our house could possibly accommodate. And that was among her problems. So this is Furniture, and my friend is dead now, so this is remembering her. Should I ring or knock or walk straight through the open door and up the stairs of your old house to pick my way among the shifting population of your recent acquisitions, chairs and cupboards, dressers, hat stands jostling like the broker's men along the landing, though you can always see the humor in the omen lighting up inside the smell of ancient smoke? Will I find you staring at your latest wardrobe, parked so that it blocks the window bay and throws its shadow on your mirrored face? The house is sold, the furniture dispersed into the auctioneers where you unearthed it, and there is no you to visit, no way back to those incendiary curls, the shy and difficult Princess of Ireland, sequestered and interred among her monumental odds and ends. I know the exit to the underworld lies somewhere here on Springbank West, before the Restoration, in between the downcast angels and the ivy and the columns lagged with moss. I know this place I've never seen, and so must you. The sky is gone, the trees, the birds, the waterfall, and we ourselves are stone, at leisure on a stone divan, among the yawning wardrobes and the mirrors in obsidian, the names and dates incised on every surface in reverse, while smoke continues rising from a grate of stone. We must be getting warm, but hell will neither wait nor long for us. It has forgotten what it never knew, your woolly yellow tights, the bird beat of your heart as you lay sleepless in my arms, the marble wing of madness poised above your head. Ordinarily, I'd be reading some quite overtly political material, but at the moment I seem to be moving slightly aside from that. Not that I don't mean it anymore, but this one again is about time and relations. It's called Wine Glasses, and it arose from reading one of Rilke's uncollected poems, Vase Painting, which refers to cups of wine that pass through each other without clinking. I was interested in this idea of representing time in that way. Wine glasses. The wine glasses move through each other in silence, not touching. The wine flows into itself and away. Slow spending of the world against the clock. Aren't we a pair? Why do I feel required to approve? They still exist, those empty rooms where we pass through one another night by night. The rose in the wine glass, the rose in the mirror, left there on the mantelpiece remains a rose. It was not of my choosing. No matter. But approve of what? these insubstantial bodies falling through and through the absence of forever, so be it. Let me raise a glass to you, as in another room you raise your own, to set the silence ringing as we go. This poem is called Rubies, and it has immediate domestic relevance because the woman it concerns managed to lose part of one of the earrings that this is about in my room a couple of hours ago. So there was a frantic search for what was described as a conical cube, which fixes part of it in place in the ear. So this is very much in my mind. Rubies for Jerry. When I turn for home in the street's black river, fish by clay are frozen, rust and gold, a shoal of earrings over which the rowan berries blaze unfallen. If the street is endless, yet the ice is coming, how can both be true? At your dressing table, you are choosing earrings from the box beside the ring tree. Put back the reticent amethyst and let the far-off turquoise wait in the midsummer dusk at Heraklion. Choose rubies now with drops of gold and wear them always. The subject seems to be time, really, doesn't it? Time. This is the runners. People have to run somewhere, and around here people choose to run through the graveyard, which is a kind of interesting combination of experiences if you happen to be innocently walking along and runners go charging past. The runners. The elegant women who run with their dogs through the graveyard, where have they been before now? They are so self-possessed, yet too preoccupied with elsewhere and with afterwards to be entirely present. To be 40-odd and run like that seems close to immortality. They glide on through the sunlit pools between the lime trees, down to where the tunneled shade begins, among the older tombs with ironwork and obelisks and disregarded claims to time's attention. There they pause to take a call or block one. They must have it all to do, like emissaries from a new creation, one that, like our own, is taken up with its supreme particulars. I wish that we could be each other's witnesses, as if I were the past for you, as you for me, the moment when the cherry tree unsleeves its ice-pink trumpery and turns to dying, while the blackbirds pick dispassionately among the stones to pass the time, as though this morning's not the thing itself, the first hot day, but instead a late revision of the future, playing out in real time, able to predict our chances to the second, only somehow set aside, like good advice that in the moment of its giving wears its welcome out. I see you pause before the tunnel's mouth, your phones aloft like failing torches, and I see your dogs, so loving and so eager for the off, and now you see them too and smile and glide away into the dark. It's probable that some of the people attending this event will have known or read the work of the late Alistair Elliott, who was a good friend and a member of our long-running workshop. And this is in memory of him. It was suggested by a picture by Daumier of a reader, somebody wearing a sun hat sitting in an orchard reading. And it forms the cover of the just published selected poems of Alistair Elliott. This is The Life, which is available from Shoestring. Anyway, this is in memory of Alistair, the reader after Daumier. If a train goes by far off, there will be others. This is the afternoon. It isn't over. Light is falling through the green, becoming gold, and as it alters, once again makes light of you, and you seem close to vanishing, but never do. the orchard where you sit and read, and where that wide white umpire's hat has made no plans, while Phaethon, barely half a dozen lines of which survive, completes itself between two pondered images. The grandchildren will come and call you soon, but soon does not arrive. This is, you wrote, the life, the only life, here between nowhere and never, the fruit unfallen and the page uncut. And penultimately, a poem called The Language, which arose out of wondering what it is that we actually think we're about when we're trying to write poems, you know, what possible purchase we have on the language and what the relation is between the language and the things that we use it to refer to, and various other things which you can make your own minds up about. The language. Falling through the aspen grove and ushering itself along the gutters, night rain speaks a language you have never understood. Where is the glossary that could admit the drowning air and lustrous blackness or the roaring? All this time, you have confused the subject with the method, when the thing done is the thing itself and not for keeping. The storm intensifies. The dark is light enough to see the slick rain shining on the slates like an effect designed by God, and yet no more designed than all the nothingness your training leads you to infer. Unsayable, sipping at the rims of manhole covers and revolving anti-clockwise down a drain pipe for a laugh, it runs off at the mouth, it drinks itself, and with its throat wide open swallows, tasting nothing, neither noun nor tense, insensibly particular, oracular yet empty, pouring from the dark into the dark, and still, for all his animated talk, indifferently bearing Orpheus's head away. Thanks for listening to me, and I hope you're going to enjoy John's reading. He got some terrific poems. And I'll finish with this very brief poem, which is a version of a famous Irish poem about the blackbird at dawn. And there are lots of versions of it. This one is dedicated to Seamus Heaney in his memory and to Kieran Carson, both of whom were friends of Newcastle. From the Irish, The Blackbird at Dawn. The blackbird at dawn is still signing his name on the air with a golden nib. Thank you for listening.
Wow, thank you, Sean, and thank you, Bill, and thank you to both of you for the warm introduction and the warm words. It's a tough act to follow, and it's a wonderful moment to be reading with you, Sean, and to have Bill introducing. And I came to Newcastle 11 years ago to do my MA, and I'm still here. So something went okay, I think. I must have done it all right. But thank you to both of you for your patience over the years and your warmth and generosity. So I'm going to read some poems from the Resurrectionists, all of the poems from the Resurrectionists. And I'm going to sort of jump in and out of different parts of the book. The early part of the book mainly concerns London. The later part of the book moves elsewhere into the country and thinks about fatherhood as well. So I'm going to sort of jump between the two sections here and there. Thames. After a day of keeping tugs and waste disposal barges, sailing races, showboats, and commuter clippers afloat, the Thames turns inwardly to find a space to stretch out in, within a space no bigger than itself, and burrows through the mud and clay where every London intersects to get its nose beneath the grave, then flips the past up like a coin to send afloat its drowned possessions, Anglo-Saxon ornaments, unexploded payloads, bone dice and oyster shells, wedding rings and number plates, and all those you might have been had your time started early. Grave diggers, barrow boys, mole men and cockle pickers, gong farmers and costermongers, resurrectionists and suicides, the taken, the lost, the given. Then settles down to dream again of all its infant waterways, the estuaries and tributaries that led it here among the rusted hulls of years, to where there is no space to breathe or settle down to sleep. The second poem is called Plague Ground and concerns, I suppose, the London ground through the ages. Plague Ground, 2013. At Farringdon Crossrail, my spade struck neither leather ball nor ceramic bowl, but a 17th century plague victim's skull. Heavy, its sockets were filled with muck. As I held his skull, I thought of the sod. On fire inside, no anesthetic. I took a photo of bones arranged like sticks in the plot where death laid him, where now I stood. 1665. I stood in the plot where I laid him dead, dead from his groin to his armpit cave, where boils throbbed till he coughed up raves of blood, a corpse cushioning his head. Commissioned to dig the old graves free, I dug the fragments of fibula and femur, the bones of the 14th century, until the soil was shoveled clean. 1348. Back into digging, I shoveled the turf over my shoulder until 6 feet deep, my spade struck rock. I pushed the heap of gangrene bodies, smoothed over the earth, hammered a post, no monument or list of stone-carved names, but a caution: do not cross this land, this hastily undone field, plagued at Farringdon, north of London. So who are the resurrectionists? I suppose beside the body snatchers, the famous resurrectionists, my interpretation as I was writing these poems became resurrectionists were writers, detectives, gardeners to some degree, archivists, people involved in cataloguing, searching, finding clues, looking into the past. And this poem is kind of in 4 different voices of these resurrectionists. Resurrectionists 1. Some nights I leave out milk and bread. They arrive in silence, no fanfare of ice on breath, and take their place as though they've always sat there weighing their words. They speak in turn. The rivers I found to dredge, the fields of wheat hissing around a knife. I follow the crumbs they scatter on their way back to their deathbeds. I see if one will let me crawl into their grave. 2. You know the men whose business is to bring the dead to surgeons so that they may live again, jerking on the table at the dawn of electricity, convulsing for the benefit of students. I too feel the urge to make something out of nothing and profit from this work. The page, my barrow, and the charge, my word. 3. I hold the tally meter and count the dead as they arrive, thrown in through the doorway of the ground. I interview and catalogue. I note and name the battlefield, preserving with my rituals of bog, clay, and peat. I build a bibliography of bone. To comprehend the narrative, I taste the dirt that lingers in their mouths. 4. Because I do not plant or seed, you will not call me gardener, and yet I work to aid the spring. I give my days to cultivate the earth with lower homes. Though who would argue what I do applies a draftsman's artistry, but those like me who dig the holes, who prep and lay the bulbs. When someday I own a plot of all I gave my life to know, with every shoot and bud you find, remember, this is me, still laboring below. Taking a slightly different turn now, Sean started with a garden poem, and I thought I'd read a bit of a garden poem of my own. And this poem concerns those, you get like one summer in your lifetime, I think, where you get to go to lots of weddings, and and I've, that hasn't happened for many of us, I guess, for a couple of years now. But this one happened to me probably about 5 or 6 years ago. Into the maze. This summer of our uni friends getting hitched in country houses, endless in its bookings of service station travel lodges, I plead with you, relent, give me my weekends back. I cannot bear to wear the grey, it oppresses like a wetsuit. Or noose the skinny tie I'm told that fashion now dictates, or swab my brogues for spots of sick from Halifax last week. Spare me the hours starving while the couple act contented near the giant chessboard, the ivy strangled archway, the hired polished horse-drawn carriage that almost turned the nervous stomachs of the newlyweds. Instead, I choose to follow her into the stately labyrinth, its walls of English yew grown tall as though to mute the flashbulbs. In the center is no golden falcon, no man-beast minotaur, nor the spandex-wearing David Bowie juggling crystal balls, the opening of Let's Dance on the ear's mind from the distant PA, but the wilderness, unmanicured, no walkways or no mileposts, no half-worn desire paths, canapes offered DIY, the best man's speech diminishes. Godless in these heavens, without a camera bent on conservation, memory is put to time's unaided test of sense. No flute to drink from, fork to spear with, only hands to hunt and pick, to Jimmy roots, to gather firewood and divine the spark to warm her skin. Here in our cabin, built of air alone, I'll study under her to learn all nature's names. North Cascades. This poem concerns a region of mountains in Washington State, where my wife's from, and concerns a trip, my first trip there, in fact, a few years ago. North Cascades. 1, running at altitude. Up this high and working hard. I'll start again. Up this high and working hard, the capillaries in our lungs have fattened like a bunch of grapes. We're spitting nickels on Hart's Pass, a one-lane gravel road of unguarded vertigo to the fire lookout, as if some violence wanted out of us. We saw a clear cut earlier, the smell of fresh felling, sweet and narcotic. They dragged the pine from the shape of itself and pulled it like a puppet that was suddenly aware and trying to shake off the master's hand. 2, on sourdough. As the sun slinks behind Mounts Fury, Terror, Challenger, headlights move like satellites orbiting the mountain roads. We've drunk our hot chocolate and said goodnight to all of this, the pain of hiking switchbacks over 6,000 feet, to the bears whose footprints surround our muddy tarn that marinades giardia from a carcass of a doe. As God lays a lit match to the tinderbox of old growth, Jack glows sinisterly above Hell's Basin. A fierce star rises. Before we go back to London, as you do, I just thought I'd read this. It's a short poem in the book, which is kind of for all my friends out there, you know, who I haven't seen for a long time, or, you know, obviously back in the day, these events would be a great occasion to go to a bar or two, a pub or two. So this poem concerns one of our such favourite terrible haunts in Newcastle, called Sergeant Pepper's. If any of you have been there, you poor people, or lucky ones. Ballad night at Sergeant Pepper's. Another bar, the orange kept in light gone bad. It's 2-for-1s and silver taps, a siren song to thirst. I find my seat, acknowledging my fellow mourners, each attending their private wake. The corner booth, the casket of the self they were an hour ago, a line of empty glasses. Tonight, I'll visit each of you to hear how well or badly everything is going, while someone sings a song that nobody should ever hear too often. Exactly what that song is, well, we'll have to have a debate, really. What is the song that no one should ever hear too often? So yeah, moving back to London now. I want to read two more elegiac poems. The first one is a kind of almost a mock elegy that, you know, finds its elegiac subject matter through its kind of performance, really, through its dramatization. And the second one is an actual elegy. This first poem is called Hansard. I've been writing elegies for the undead, imagining the hovels where their souls will be sent and making sense of their still in use possessions. I'm pressing ears to walls and doors and taking the minutes of the air, my pen on paper, a cardiograph. I'm planning funerals ahead. But nightly, ghosts arrive with tickets to the picture house to see a film from their time shot in black and white, with the POW leads dressed in old style hats and coats. And even though we spoke this morning, I see my teenage father help the Right Honourable George Brown rise out of the gutter with Dave Darkins and a copper as I walk past Downing Street, no armed guards or cameras, to a black cab on Whitehall. No waiting paparazzi. My father's on a year of half nights, printing Hansard from the Commons. I hear him whisper as I stroll, I signed the official Secrets Act, smug to know the price hike before the printer's local. And as I write some copy on a client's APRs, I hear myself say to him, Dad, you ever get creative? Change the words, revise the budget. No, never, not our place. We left the lies to higher men. And as I get this down on paper, I watch him prime the typeset, see him hold his inky hand, much younger than I am now, to pass the baton, no, the torch, no, a cloudy pint. Now here's my mother's father, who never touched a drop, lighting up to watch TV. I ask him what's on, but his eyes and mouth are stitched up, and I do not have the heart. And this next poem is for my grandfather, Fred, who after the war came back to London and worked for the rest of his days in a fruit and veg market, in several fruit and veg markets around the city. The last good market. Being faithless, I've always preferred to think of death as the end of a movie. No sequels or questions. The final scene as clear as glass. No room for misinterpretation or for reading into by skeptical scholars. This one's for the pragmatists who like to know the end before it starts. But watching Eileen on the day that we cremated Fred had me thinking of a compromise. How after all, there might be somewhere they all congregate, worn out from the journey across the barren afterlife. Take your pick. The golden city, the courtyard made of cloud, or the house that you were born in. Though I can't shake the feeling that nurses rouse to empty wards with no one but themselves to heal, and from blackboards teachers turn to classrooms of abandoned chairs and desks, and that one day my father will wake up from snoring in his black cab to wait for no fares on the rank. But there are those of us who like our work, and glad again to be of use. Fred is lifting up the mudded sacks in the last good market, admiring how his muscles flex, to fill the stall with growth as fresh as the January morning when he slipped out of his suffering and beyond the fruitless task of dreaming up the ways that faith employs the dead. I know that we must let them rest, but I'm compelled to speak of what at night they show me, the streets where they hold daily market, where they shout their throats red raw and serve their last reductions on imperishable goods. Okay, so I'm just going to read 3 more shortish poems from the towards the end of the book. And these all kind of concern becoming a father for the first time. Single liter engine. And suddenly you're behind the wheel in something someone's dad would drive. No spoilers or go faster stripes or music playing loudly to impress the girls at traffic lights, but a vehicle neatly middle-aged, a body hitting 65 when it should be doing 70 because there's someone else's life on the back seat in the maxi-cozy and finally asleep. And the you who seemed so far away, at best a speculation, with no points on his license, an address you've never seen inside of, and a date of birth that's history to his students, is with you in the slip lane, checking mirrors, shifting gears, as you merge onto the motorway, a voice inside and in command, the man you never knew you were. This penultimate poem concerns the first summer of my daughter's life, which was ridiculously hot. And the only place we could really feed her and find kind of solace was in graveyards often, where they had the best shade in the shade of the churches there. Shade. And when she needed feeding, we fed her in graveyards on benches covered with lichen. Beneath palms and succulents, with a damp flannel we cooled her head by the Metcalfs and Tregarthens, who, tired of tears and the damning of drivers, by the living Metcalfs and Tregarthens, stood cooing at the sight of our girl in a language we know as the breeze. And when she needed feeding again, we sat by the stone in the shade of the abbey, all the while our baby was sucking your breast that filled up like a cistern. The minute she stopped, the dead leaned in with their odor of milk, pursing their lips as though to kiss our baby's head in the growing shade they bring with them. And thank you. It's been an absolute tremendous privilege to be reading with Sean this evening. This last poem is called Night Change. I step across the moon, the small hand of the clock, to lay the bundle of my daughter down, knowing where the flooring waits to exhale. Night remembers other nights. I alight from one life into another, from my long and sobering walk, and creak down to my knees. A father, still a child, bowing to repay his debt. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, John. Thank you, Sean. That was splendid reading. And we have about 10 minutes, 11 minutes for questions now. So some questions are coming in, and I'm going to try and pretend that I'm asking them through asking them. The one thing that struck me quite strongly, it came back from Carol Ruman's comment on the first poem you read, John, at Thames, where she says, that the poet Barrow Boy delivers a whole river and a rumble of activity, and the rumble of activity is the thing that really interests me, because that she says somewhere else, this lost and fading working class London, which you depicted so beautifully this evening. And I was just sort of thinking about that, what you're after in that. And I think in a way, this is a kind of question we could have for both of you, one after the other, because I do think there's something of that in certainly in Hammersmith, and there's certainly kind of an elegiac sense of England past, suffused in all the poems that we've been hearing. So obviously it's not a nostalgia, you're not simply nostalgic, and you're not necessarily looking for life lessons in some kind of banal sense, but there is a kind of yearning, searching of the past in your work there, John. I mean, do you want to talk about that? You want to say something about that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Bill. It's a good question, a good observation. That poem in particular, I think, it was partly an attempt to write a poem without any full stops in it, as a kind of long barreling sentence. And I wanted to see if the sentence itself was capable of including lots of different things, with this sense of digging into the past, while at the same time being very much caught within the energy of the moment, the present. And I think that's really something I've been sort of unconsciously trying to do for a long time, really. And as I've got closer to this book's publication, I've been more aware of it. But whenever I'm going into the past, like some sort of strange time traveler, or double visioning, seeing it existing at the same time, I'm trying to sort of create energy, make the poem dramatic enough to kind of hold both together. And I guess, in some ways, this is something that, I've learned poets like Sean, who does this, so brilliantly in the long poem like Hammersmith, which seems to meander in and out of dream and reality and the past and the present quite well. Yeah, so thank you.
Okay, well, that leads me on to a question that's coming from the floor. If we imagine the floor, which is a few people have asked about influence, and one person has said, I hear Larkin, John, in old style hats and coats. Is Larkin lurking, they say.
Is Larkin lurking?
Is Larkin lurking?
Yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah. Well, that is a direct quotation. I have put quotation marks in the book, so I'm not directly pinching that from Larkin in that poem Hansard. But no, I think there must be loads of Larkinisms lurking in the book. Poems like Here, especially for its dramatic energy. That poem that just dives from the city out to the coast. That's huge influence on me, and as was a poem like Church Going.
Yeah, I'll take that one over to Sean. I mean, I know Larkin is perhaps just an instance of this for you, Sean. But I am thinking about that kind of purgatorial London in your work. There's a little quote at the end of Hammersmith about the labyrinth. The labyrinth where class, race, political disappointment, and madness were waiting. It seems to me that that there's a kind of this is in all the new poems as well. There's this kind of strange after condition that you're exploring, and I was just wondering, if we looked at that again, it's an attempt to inhabit history in some sense. Would you say? I mean, what is it that you feel? You talked about time being the theme whilst you were reading. Is that the case?
There is a certain sense. There is certainly a sense that the desire to inhabit history. I think it's very tiresome when writing about the past is described as nostalgia, because nostalgia is a very particular phenomenon, and not all writing about the past is nostalgic. There are large swathes of the past that you wouldn't go near if you had a pointed stick, really. But I'm interested also in in what people living in the past thought was possible, in their conception, their hopes of the future, what they desired, what they loved, what they thought might conceivably be the case, and necessarily, time being what it is, quite a lot of these hopes are disappointed. But yes, it's also an act of, I suppose, of retrieval, in the sense that you want to do justice to what you imagine of the experience of your parents, for example, or other members of your family, or other people you're interested in. It is, however grim it might be, it is an attempt to do honor to them. Yes, that's significant to me.
It's kind of a space beyond one's own memory and and reliant on the memory of others, and that being a fragile and easily lost thing. One of the questions that's coming up is about structuring of books, because in a sense, here's a first book and a 10th book, and I think that's Toby Martinez de las Rivas. Hey, Toby is asking, what's your experience of putting these collections together? And again, that's a nice question to ask both of you, because I presume there's some top tips in there, but also just how did it work for you? So maybe start with Sean and then go back to John there.
Well, I hope when I get to book 17 that I've figured out how to do it.
Yeah,
I had a theory about this at one stage, and I even wrote a little essay about how to organize a book, and then now 15 years later I realized that I had no idea what I was talking about, and I'm trying to sort out the next one at the moment, book 11, and it's mysterious. Are there families of poems? Do you interrupt thematic continuities? Do you use contrasting forms? All these questions that students have asked me over many years, and they continue to ask you, presumably, to which at the moment I have no satisfactory answer, which is interesting, because if it were cut and dried, well, that would be writing from beyond the grave in one sense, wouldn't it, John?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any, trial and error. I think, I tried a lot of different orders out. In fact, the order I submitted to Bloodaxe is very different to the order it ended up being. A lot of the later poems were at the start of the book. So I didn't even get it right, the first time when I thought it was right. So, but yeah, I mean, like Sean, I guess I think I do look for sort of thematic groupings, poems that seem, of the same language or of the same world. But there isn't really one way to do it, is there? I'm hoping the next time I do it, it might be easier, because there was definitely several collections before this one that never saw the light of day, but were variants of this, I guess, with other things too. But I suppose, because it was the first book, it's a bit different. It's work I've produced over like a 10-year period, really, and there's a kind of a constant re-sifting the water for gold, I think, and the gold changes over the years, and and so some poems fall back through to the riverbed and they get lost, and other ones stay in the sieve, to use continue my metaphor of the book. So I feel like my own aims and intentions changed, and obviously having the personal come into it more. Before my daughter was born, there was nothing really of me in this book. It was all London, place, family, and then suddenly those poems, I felt, added something new and important to the collection and allowed me to finish it.
Brilliant. Well, that word finish is, I'm afraid, ringing an ominous bell round about now, because it's almost time for the Vogon open mic. And so we're going to have to bring things to a close, I'm afraid. There are still a few questions we could be asking, and this is a rich area being opened up there to develop. But unfortunately, we now have to bring things to a close. So I'm just going to thank a few people, and obviously the first people to thank are Melanie Birch and Pete Hebden for making all of this this possible for me to mess up for you tonight. So thank you very much to both of them. And I'm just going to thank our readers. Obviously there's kind of technical thing about this, which is that it's difficult to applaud and be seen to be applauding. So what I would like everyone to do is, please, could you applaud as though they can hear you, whilst I say thank you very much one more time to Sean O'Brien and to John Challis.
Virtual applause.
Oh, here's what it looks like, yeah.